I'm Dimitri Mugianis. I've been a psychedelic and harm reductionist for over 20 years.
Great. So the question I wanted to go over today is, what are some things that somebody should be considering as they are preparing for their first psychedelic ceremonies? What tips do you have for somebody who's preparing for their first ceremony?
Well, I guess one thing is preparing for after the psychedelic ceremony is the first thing I would say. And it also depends on what you're going in for. If it's a psychedelic, if it's a ceremony, or if it's a therapeutic session, I guess I should say. What I would suggest is that you, if possible, you have time afterwards, that you have at least a day or two where you will not be distracted, or the distractions will be as little as possible. And I know that's a luxury or an impossibility in a lot of cases, but the idea is to let the experience sort of marinate. I mean, a lot of the outcome in terms of physically, it could be really varied, including being completely exhausted. So as much time as you can take away from the world and away from stress and away from your devices, the better, to allow for that marination process and to allow for reflection, and through the reflection, perhaps some insight or healing. That'd be the first thing. And then know your set and setting before you go in. I'm kind of going backwards here. Set and know and be comfortable with the people you're going to be doing it with. You have to feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, listen to that voice and don't do it. And then, part of that, of course, is the safety is trust, because you're going to have a lot of things come up during the session that you want resolved in the rational space before you go there. So you're not in there wondering about the individuals that you're working with, wondering about the medicine that you're taking. Make sure you ask a lot of questions. You have a right to ask a lot of questions, and make sure you get the answers. If people aren't willing to answer, then that's a real good sign that you don't want to work with them. And then the other thing is just make sure you're in a space to have, you may be coming to have the experience. So you may be coming from a space of suffering and you want to alleviate the suffering. And that's why a lot of us come to it. But make sure you're in a place where if something is jolting or discombobulating, that it's not going to further cause disruption in your life. So and other than that, if you have a spiritual practice, tune into your spiritual practice. If you are working with a therapist, make sure that you're having conversations with your therapist. If you're in some sort of group setting that you feel that you can trust someone, let someone know you can trust. Don't, on the same token, don't bring it to someone who's not going to understand. Follow the dietary restrictions of your practitioner. Sometimes there are dietary restrictions, sometimes they're not, depending on the practitioner, depending on the tradition, depending on the drugs or medicine. And if anything is giving you pause, real pause, trust that and just put it on pause. The thing to remember is, psychedelics are for the most part very safe, but there are some situations, interactions that can occur with medication. That's the other thing. Make sure that there's no drug interaction with any medications you're taking. But if something's giving you pause, just put it on pause, because there's never a psychedelic emergency, meaning there's never an ambulance going to a psychedelic session. But once in a great while, there's an ambulance leaving the psychedelic session.
Okay. Thanks so much for that overview. So I'm just going to recap some of the things that you said. So you talked about setting aside a day after your ceremony to process. taking care of set and setting and any logistical details ahead of time, asking a lot of questions, tuning into a spiritual practice if you have one, being in conversation with your therapist if you have one, dietary restrictions if necessary, making sure that there are no drug interactions, just paying attention to something is giving you pause and take a pause and just remembering that there's no such thing as a psychedelic emergency. Um, that seems like a great overview. Any other thoughts?
I would just say there's one thing I thought about. Make sure that all the little things that might drive you nuts in the days after, get those done. Like if you got a bill to pay, if there's a major event coming up in your life, well, I'm just going to take this one meeting via Zoom. Don't do that. Make sure, try to find time where you at least have at least a day. The more the better. But like all the little stuff, try to have that already taken care of. If there's childcare issues, if possible, have it worked out. If there's pet care issues, if possible, have that worked out. You want to have as little responsibility in the day afterwards. Think of yourself as a newborn, you know, a chicklet just coming out of the egg, and treat yourself like that afterwards.